Welcome to episode 3 of our Let's Talk Battery series, where we're talking to experts on storage and distributed renewable energy systems in Nepal. So for this episode, we have Mr. Douglas Hinrichs. He's the team leader of the Nepal Renewable Energy Program with us to talk about battery storage and his views on energy storage in general. Welcome, Douglas.
Thank you. Namaste. Yes, Douglas Hinrichs, the team leader for Nepal Renewable Energy Program. I don't know if I'm an expert per se on battery storage, but I have seen enough around the world to know that it's a very pressing need to make distributed renewables more viable, more dispatchable, more affordable, etc. So yeah, I'm glad to be here, and even though I'm not an expert, I hope to learn and teach with you. So I hope we have just kind of a two-way conversation. We'll kind of explore the issues.
Sure. Why don't you go ahead and tell us more about NREP and with its goals and objective here in the country?
Yeah, sure, thank you. So I'm the team leader of NREP, and I just want to say I'm speaking on behalf of myself as a person, not for the program. We're sponsored by the UK government, not speaking for them either, but we've been informed by this program. It's a £18 million program started in 2019. About half the money is for technical assistance from folks like me, my team. We have about 20 people working to assess projects. We build a project pipeline of distributed solar and microhydro, et cetera. And we find innovative financing, including our Sustainable Energy Challenge Fund, which is based on viability gap funding. So if, let's say, a project has a 7-year payback, and it's not bankable because investors want a 4-year payback, we'll pay down that gap to bring it from 7 to maybe 4 years. So we call it viability gap, we pay that down. So it's a competitive, very transparent way to incentivize the market. And that's make projects bankable, make the banks more comfortable, et cetera. So besides developing a pipeline and financing those projects, we also look at policy and regulatory issues, including tariffs, feed-in tariffs, or the lack of an energy storage tariff here, which is a bit of an issue for liability. And also, we look at things like seasonal complementarity. We have a lot of hydro. I say hydro's king here, right? A lot of interest and a lot of investments made, and rightly so. It's a great, plentiful resource here. We're blessed with so much hydro here. Even we have excess in the wet season, deficit in the dry season. So then, what happens in the dry season? Our program would like to see more solar and storage to fill in that deficit in the dry season. But as is, there have been procurements of energy from India, which is primarily coal-based. So if Nepal is serious about their COP26, decarbonization goals, including net zero emissions by 2050, we think maybe earlier, then we need to displace that coal energy with something that's cleaner, more reliable, and more local too. And that also drives, it lets the local folks accrue benefits, including jobs, economic opportunity, whole new ways to raise the index of living here for folks here.
Absolutely.
So lots of advantages to local solar, local storage.
Yeah, but I mean, at least in a country like Nepal, right? I mean, we had Upper Tamakoshi just come online that solved a lot of our problems. Do you see like these distributed renewable energy have any, potential, or would it have any significant bearing on the electricity infrastructure of the country, especially in a country where we've got so much hydro potential and there's so many hydropower projects currently being built?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I supported the U.S. Department of Energy for some time, maybe 15 years, on distributed energy resources. So what does that mean? So it just means not centralized. So once you have centralized generation, like hydro here, you're also vulnerable to different disruptions, including glacial dam outbursts, transition line that go down, climate change. It's funny with climate change. If there's a great increase in temperature, I think short term you're gonna have increased hydro, but over time it's going to decrease. And the large IPPs here, hydro IPPs here, say that in fact they're predicting a decreased production of hydro over the next 10-20 years. So with distributed, let's say solar with storage, you don't have that vulnerability. And I believe we're the 4th most vulnerable country in the world to climate. So with distributed generation and storage, we don't have that vulnerability. We have generation right by the load. You have no transmission, no distribution, just a direct connection. And you have ideally increased reliability because you have solar right there, you have storage right there, you maybe have controls to monitor this, you're still connected to the grids, you've got redundancy built in. And it's a much better way to kind of plan ahead and make let's say you're running a metal work plant. if that goes down halfway, if your power is lost halfway down, you might lose a whole load of this metal,
Absolutely.
or whatever the product is. So you increase your reliability, and we are working with NEA on some of these issues, but I'm jumping ahead perhaps. So
Sure.
go ahead.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great segue because I was trying to come to NEA anyways. I mean, you mentioned that as a consumer, I mean, there's multiple advantages, especially like securing my own supply.
Yeah.
I think if that is a primary concern to me, probably distributed renewable energy is a great solution. Foolproofing my business or like my house against the effects of climate change. But
Right.
as utilities, right? So I mean, there's different utility models all over the world, but for utilities like NEA, which have been primarily building their own projects, and an IPP, like with hydropower coming into the picture, it's not been a while. Why should NEA and utilities like NEA care about distributed renewable energy and try and bring them into the mix?
Yeah, so I think it's fair to say utilities around the world, they kind of want to do what they know, what they're comfortable doing, but they don't want to take risks necessarily. I mean, they're mandated to have reliable energy. So you kind of understand their hesitation to do something new. But in fact, if you understand what their needs are, and we work with NEA to identify some of those needs, in Western and Midwestern Nepal here, they've got some grid constraints and they've got some reliability issues. So they've asked my program to work with them to identify, I think, maybe 10 districts where the grid needs some extra support in terms of either generation capacity or techie terms like VAR support, voltage ampere reactive support, to make the power more reliable and cleaner. So if you have a highly sensitive operation, the clean power, the sine waves are nice and clean. Getting techie here, but it's just a way to improve the quality and reliability of those the energy supplied to those mainly commercial industrial loads. But also some large commercial developments like in Lumbini we're looking at. There's the Birgunj industrial corridor, which I understand is seeing some difficulties right now, some higher prices. So could we site a large, let's say 50 megawatt solar farm near there? There's a special economic zone right there, or Simra. There's some abandoned sugar plants, etc., with some storage, and there's some large batteries. We come back to the different battery types here, which could provide some more cost-effective energy, reliable energy to those areas, and you would also reduce your vulnerability from the imported coal, those prices which can spike. I think what was the latest number when 28 rupees?
32 rupees.
32
that's
rupees.
the price at which you bought electricity.
So even solar can come in at 6, 7 maybe. With storage maybe less than 20 still. So if you look at the economics, besides all these kind of feel-good attributes of distributed solar, there's the money part, and that's really what drives decisions. So distributed solar and storage can often save money, and besides all the benefits we talked about.
Yeah. So I mean, we talked about solar. We talked about how that could probably increase supply. But obviously, with renewable energy like solar and wind, we're talking about variability. And obviously storage then becomes an important part of the conversation, right? So especially in a country like Nepal, where we have a lot of hydro, as you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of seasonality. I mean, it's a seasonal patterns. There's a dry season, there's a monsoon season where we've got a lot of demand, but at the same time we also have daily variability, right? So we've got certain peak during the morning hours, but also during the evening hours. I mean, and we're talking about like additional variability because of generation, right? So given so many variables, where do you think, how do you think like solar could actually add value in this entire ecosystem?
Yeah, so if you have a nice big battery system, and let's say I think lithiums and lead acids are allowed to propagate here in Nepal. There's some larger systems called, I'm a kind of an advocate of flow batteries, iron flow batteries. They're non-toxic, they don't degrade like lithiums. They can last 25 years, absolutely no degradation. I mean, tested by U.S. Department of Energy. They start at 50 kWs, they can go up to many megawatts at a time. So something like a flow battery at a commercial industrial site, or at a home, I guess you could scale it down. They can take care of peak load management. So if people come home and they cook, maybe they have electric cooking, which are my program's doing. If you have thousands of people cooking at the same time, you have a peak load. So batteries could be charged by your solar during the day, or let's say really cheap hydropower at night. And those batteries can be fully dispatchable, dischargeable to take care, to completely manage that peak load. That makes NEA happy because, as a whole, NEA happy because those wires don't heat up, and then you reduce the line losses from heat.
And also, they're probably losing a lot of revenue during the nighttime because there's not enough consumption.
Yeah, what are you gonna do with
time,
that?
right?
They're just wasting it, right? Just
Exactly.
wasting, yeah.
But at the moment, say I'm a consumer, right? So a domestic
Okay.
consumer. I don't have any incentive to put up storage in my household besides reliability, right?
It might be a hassle right now, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
it's too much of a
Yeah,
problem.
yeah,
So why would
yeah.
I mean, see, like if NEA, there's so much advantages for NEA for to incentivize domestic users to install battery.
Yeah.
I mean, how could they actually promote like such incentives to domestic users?
Yeah, so by having the advantage of seeing how several other countries are doing things, there's time of use or time of day rates, which when electricity is more valuable, people pay more for them.
Yeah.
So there's TOD or TOU paradigms for tariffs. Is that being done here? No. And also, I don't want to speak for the utility here at all, but they think that just bringing in more hydro is going to solve the problem, and that could solve the problem for the dry season when there's a deficit, could reduce the imported coal we talked about. But in the wet season, what happens is, I understand those contracts or PPAs, power purchase agreements, are primarily take or pay.
Yeah.
So it means they pay the producer whether that power is used or not.
Yeah.
So my understanding is, even with the recent PPA to India, they're still wasting a lot of power. It's called spilling, and wasting a lot of money every day. So it could very well be an NEA's benefit to take a good hard look at just the economics of distributed solar and storage to displace this, let's say, inefficient resource use.
And also, like, I think something that I am constantly reminded when I'm traveling through Kathmandu is this big construction work that's been going on, where NE is trying to overhaul the infrastructure, trying to build capacity, build the distribution network, so that people are able to use electric cars, say use electric cooking, right? I mean, which is, I'm guessing, quite expensive to NEA.
Of course. So you have all that, and you also get lots of feedback from folks. I see on Twitter, where it's dust man do again, that kind of stuff. So it's also a health hazard, and it's no joking. And EVs are an obvious solution, running on pure. If we could do hydro and solar to charge EV infrastructure, that's just ideal. I mean, other countries are doing that. In I think Bhutan, they're looking at that pure renewables. Iceland, they're looking at geothermal and renewables. So what a great paradigm that would be here. So a purely clean e-mobility paradigm would be fantastic for runners and athletes and just people who live in Kathmandu. What a great setup that would be. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So if you could charge your car up at night with the stored solar with a battery, that's just ideal.
But I mean, so we talked about the challenges, but also at the same time some of the solutions, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's sort of like the policy needs to support these innovations, and like you can talk about storage being placed in different distribution centers, helping NEA save a lot of money. But if it's not backed by the right policy, nothing's going to come to light. So
that's right.
What kind of policy interventions do you think are necessary for such changes to come to light?
Yeah, there are a few things. We talked about time of day, and let me go back one step. In many other countries, maybe not here as much, but there's often a regulatory commission which looks at these issues, and they set rates, they set tariffs, they look at consumer happiness, etc. I think here, in my estimation from observation, I think they control a lot of those things. So maybe a different way of governance could address some of these, let's say, maybe inefficiencies. So yeah, time of day, time of use would be one great thing. As I understand, for EV charging, there's, I think, a 5 rupees per kWh charge with only a 20% margin. So will that incentivize someone to invest in EV charging stations? I'm hearing from developers, no, it's not enough, because you have the CapEx, capital expense, you have the OpEx, operating expense. It's not enough, 20% is not enough. So if we're serious about EV paradigms, we've got to fix those things, as well as all the import duties. And I think maybe you have a better idea if you've looked into those import duties for EVs versus other kinds of cars, and also solar products. So maybe you can tell me about that.
Yeah, so absolutely. So I think EVs are taxed at 15%. That's the custom duty. But for some reason, batteries are taxed at 40%.
40.
That includes like 15% custom duty, there's 10% excise duty, and then the 13% VAT on top, right? So adds up to 40%. And if you're looking at technologies like lithium ion, there's additional 5%, which just makes it incredibly expensive, even for like energy service companies or even like consumers who want to take a bet with batteries, because that's what NEA needs, right? I mean, investment into batteries because they cannot do it all
That's
on
right.
their own.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Can I mention one more thing?
Yeah.
We mentioned the two kinds of batteries which are used here. If we want to do some larger C&I, commercial, industrial, and grid scale support with batteries, we need to look at changing the regulations to allow things like the iron flow batteries, which are again non-toxic, non-degrading. They're big, they've got a large footprint, but that shouldn't matter in many applications here. So we have to re-regulate which kinds of batteries are used here. And my program is looking at actually we're going to do a Nepali Energy Storage Summit.
Yeah.
And we're going to bring in experts from UK, US, Japan, China, India. We don't know where all, but 4 or 5 experts which can help us figure out which applications, which technologies are out there, and which ones best fit the applications. So, like if it's for cars, lithium ions probably. If it's for lower end projects, maybe lead acid. The executive director of AEPC is looking at displacing the lead acid for solar home systems because of the danger. People throw them away. If that gets into the water system, it really leads to bad effects, mental health effects for the children. So some really commonsensical things we want to kind of explore, and then come up with a report like, here are the technologies, here are the applications, let's make a match between those, and then change the regulations to let in, let's say, the flow batteries.
So 3 things you mentioned there, right? So let's take it one at a time, right? So C&I solutions, how can commercial and industrial customers take advantage of technologies like flow batteries? The second one is, like the recycling issues, I think that recently come up.
It's a serious,
And then third is like the Energy Summit issue, right? I mean, which is this amazing conference that you're organizing, not that far.
We hope amazing, yeah.
So I'd love to learn about all those 3 things in tandem. Let's start with the commercial and industrial customer, right? And this is the right time to talk about this because right now we're currently going through scheduled rollouts in industrial zones, right? So a lot of industries in Bhairava, Birganj, Butwal, they are actually facing 12 hours of power cut.
And how can they stay in business with those kinds of outages? They can't.
And if they run diesel generators, A, it's costly, it's B, it's emitting a lot of CO2.
What's the cost for diesel genset to run?
I mean, right now it can go up from 30 rupees per unit to 45 rupees per unit. No, we've actually seen 90 rupees per unit, depending upon like how efficiently they're being run. But surely there are lots of these commercial and industrial customers who are paying significantly high amount for use of diesel. They're having to shut down, and see, they already have this time of day tariff in place, right? So how can these institutions leverage storage technology to save a lot of money and increase reliability for their institution?
So C&I property, and often commercial pays higher tariffs than industrials. They can set up their own PPA, power purchase agreement, with an independent power producer that has solar and storage together. A long time ago, before hydro was big here, there was a lot of discussion about how can hydro play a role here. And the Independent Power Producer Association in Nepal was formed to just have one stronger voice to advocate for hydro. I understand there's maybe similar issues going for solar here. So there are ways to kind of increase that voice of solar storage, that industry, and allow more deals to be done. And as case studies are proven to show savings, I think it's going to just kind of have a domino effect. So more and more businesses will adopt those technologies.
Absolutely, but and now let's talk about recycling because it's been a big issue and it's a big part of the conversation here, right? I mean, batteries are known to sort of use acid, a lot of heavy metals, toxic chemicals.
Yep.
I mean, especially the recent technologies. Have there been a lot of changes to the toxicity of the newer battery technologies, and how can we support recycling of these of the old battery technologies, right? So how can we promote batteries with the understanding that they can actually, there's some harm associated with the use of battery to the environment?
That's a great question. I'm an environmentalist at heart, so it's an important issue. So we recently had an EV policy dialogue where this same question came up from 3-4 different people. So there's a lot of interest in it. So like, what was our plan? What is my program's plan to encourage recycling? That's not really in our mandate per se, but it's a huge problem that we'd like to address. So if you look at solar home systems, they often have lead acid batteries. If those are, we literally call them batteries in the bushes. When they aren't effective, they just throw them out in the bushes. If that lead acid gets into water, it could affect the mental well-being of children, etc. So that's just a nasty thing. So I think AEPC and other folks are looking at replacing those with lithium, which are less toxic. So besides that, there are I mentioned the flow batteries. These iron flow batteries are a great example of new technology. But it's very basic chemistry. It's like 2 vats of ions. There's salts, and you can get a current going between those because of the ionic disparity, etc. I'm not a chemist, but I know they work. They've been tested by U.S. Department of Energy. They don't degrade. Lithium ions, depending on how many charge cycles they go through, they might last 7-8 years. Maybe you can tell me, is that true? 7-8 years?
Even longer, I've heard.
Okay. But I think there are replacement costs. With these flow batteries, there's no cost, no replacement. So if you look at life cycle costs, they're pretty cost effective. In fact, I just saw something on LinkedIn today saying they're looking at 2 cents, close to 2 rupees per kWh over life cycle, 25 years.
Yeah.
That's hard to beat.
Absolutely.
It's a third of the price of solar, let's say, right? So if you link up very cost-effective storage with pretty cost-effective solar, which is going down those prices, I'm guessing folks who can bundle these solutions together, they could take on monopolistic utility and beat them at the cost point. What do you think? You think is that true?
I think so, but I feel like there's a win-win situation here for both the entities, right? So from what you're saying, like what I got was, say like an industry who's currently facing massive power crisis.
Yeah.
They're paying a lot for energy, can just install a battery, reduce their energy cost significantly, and also at the same time a utility can balance their overall power
they would benefit as well.
demand. So there's a win-win for both these parties.
At least 2 wins, maybe win-win-win. So
exactly,
at least,
exactly.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think that's a great thought. But obviously that's how we achieve that, right? And there's probably like the problem of financing to resolve, and also the small issue of like how do you like ensure that right regulations are in place to incentivize the proliferation.
Yeah. My program is doing what they can on the policy and regulatory front. But in looking around with our challenge fund, we've had other development partners come to us and say, hey, can we put our money through your challenge fund because it's already approved by the federal government. So once I started looking around at investors and other development partners, we found up to $200 billion US without trying that hard for people who want to invest in solar and storage. It's amazing. I think there's one, I won't call out which development partner, they want to dedicate $2.5 million to just batteries. And they'll work with NEA to shore up their grid and add that reliability which we all need, especially in areas like beer guns and other commercial developments, where it's really you need that reliability for economic growth. I mean, that's kind of a tenet of what we're doing for international development in general. Reliable energy equals economic growth potential. So it's just a direct connection.
Absolutely. So it seems like there is funding available.
There is.
There are customers who are facing significant crisis.
Yeah.
And there is utility who seems to be willing. So how do we get them all together in one room and get them to actually communicate and talk and understand the problems that each other are facing?
I think the parties are willing, but I think some parties need to see actual spreadsheets and actual projects in operation to prove the benefits. And we can do, you can talk until we're blue in the face on an S PowerPoint, like here are calculations, but once there are projects, iron in the ground and actual results and money flows, cash flows in a spreadsheet, bank accounts, whatever, I think people need to see that evidence base of it actually does work here. Then they can calculate their benefits to their own entity. Everyone's got their own interests, their own hesitations, their own risks. So to mitigate those risks, we need more evidence base, more projects.
And also more dialogue, I presume, right? I mean,
we think we do a lot of that. We think we're good at it, but we need more, no doubt.
Absolutely. And tell me more about this battery storage conference that you're planning. When is it going to happen? What can we expect? And who all would be participating?
Well, we'd love to invite you, of course, but we've identified some other experts from around the world on flow batteries, on lithium ions, on lead acid, etc. And again, we want to have a kind of a technology review, like what's out there, what are the prices, what are the costs, what are the environmental impacts perhaps, and then look at what the applications are, the needs are here, and make that matchmaking. Pick the best technology with the best application, and look at the cost, of course, and like you said, how is it going to benefit which party? And if those benefits accrue kind of equitably across the different interests, I think we'll create some win-win-win-wins. So we'll see. And when it is, it's probably going to be second quarter of my program, which is this summer, basically.
Yeah. So it seems like, we've pinpointed the advantages to all these stakeholders. It's just a matter of quantifying the incentives to each party and sort of like actually doing a sandbox trial, right? Actually doing a pilot project and verifying these numbers before you can actually talk about scaling it up, right?
And again, my programs work with him to put actual projects in Western and Midwestern Nepal.
Yeah.
So get more evidence, more proof, and that reliability that they need.
Hopefully we'll be able to get a few projects going ourselves to sort of like come up with actual numbers and like make this conversation more easier.
Perfect.
So now we've finally found ourselves a glass of beer. We've come to the end of the show. Thank you so much, Doug, for dropping by.
My pleasure. Thanks for the
sharing
invite.
your thoughts.
Yeah.
And cheers to storage
And solar.
and solar.
Yeah. Cheers.